Hi, my name is Reena Smith,
And I'm Kitty Shi.
And I'm Madison Harris.
and we're going to be discussing the impact of climate change on international migration. So to start, climate-induced international migration is when the effects of climate change result in weather-related disasters that cause widespread damage to homes, businesses, and infrastructure. These disasters can include floods, storms, and more, which have a faster onset to the existing area. There are also disasters that are not as abrupt and instead have a slower onset, which include droughts, heat waves, ocean acidification, and rising sea levels. Events such as these can result in long-term damage towards widespread industries such as the agricultural industry. Large systems like agriculture are heavily relied upon in people's lives because they contribute to the livable conditions of one's community. And due to this, the destruction of these industries can be detrimental, forcing people to migrate. Sometimes these effects are not too extreme, resulting in temporary residence in other people's homes, but they can be very harmful to the extent where one has to move to another country. Okay, and these events increase people's social vulnerability and specifically target those that live in underdeveloped countries. These areas usually lack governmental support to help rebuild and prevent damage from these disasters. They also do not have the necessary resources to combat these events. The graph on the right depicts how natural disasters and migrant stock from poorer countries follow the same trend and have been increasing over time, meaning it is becoming a larger problem. For example, in 1980, there were around 500 natural disasters and 5 million migrant stock, but in 2000, there were around 1,700 natural disasters and 14 million migrant stock, representing this increase. Most of the time, these events are not too severe, resulting in internal displacement. However, they can be very harmful and lead to the migration patterns represented on the graph.
It is worth noting that due to the fact that internal displacement is more prevalent in cases of climate change, as it is cheaper and involves fewer legal proceedings, the changes in rates of climate international migration is largely indirectly impacted by climate change. As we often hear about the rise of climate migrants, they often do not dramatically impact the already limited statistics that we have access to regarding international migration, as countries do not consider them refugees and migration information is kept out of the public eye. Instead, we see the same population of people, those from Asia, Central and South America, and various regions of Africa where the economic state of the country is already struggling, migrate to wealthy countries nearby. Often this form of international migration is simply for the purpose of labor, so they can send money back to their families in the home country after climate change destroyed their means of labor. As you can see, flooding is a major cause of average annual weather-related displacement from 2010 to 2020 in Asia, Africa, Central America, and South America. This is due to low sea levels of the land and the significant number of people who live near coastal areas that suffer from rises in sea level or storm flooding. While North America has the third most number of people displaced due to climate change, the majority of this displacement is internal. So what can we expect in the future for climate change-induced international migration? As climate change continues to intensify weather conditions such as floods, droughts, tropical storms, and sea level rises from the melting of glaciers, many are expected to be forced into international migration as their home countries can no longer sustain the populations that reside there. This can be anything from inaccessibility of shelter from destruction or price increases, lack of clean water, or lack of food production. This predicted increase of international migration over the years will only increase the restrictions placed on climate migrants as they are not classified as refugees that seek help. In turn, this allows countries to turn them away without aid and leave migrants in a legal limbo. Often, this fuels This is fueled by disapproval from the people in the countries where climate migrants are trying to enter. As there is a fear of a loss in resources and racism. However, we can start using international migration as a preventative measure to displacement. A strategical plan to remove people from potential dangerous environments would lead to fewer conflicts of interest.
So everyone's affected by climate change, but some are better able to defend against its effects. Concerning economic status, those who are rich can utilize more expensive technologies in order to protect their belongings, while those who are poor cannot afford to make these needed improvements and are more susceptible to the extreme weather that results from climate change. Although the poor have more need to migrate, they do not have the funds to travel to another nation, while the rich have both options. They can either protect their property or migrate. Cultural norms and attitudes also play a role in whether a group migrates or not. Some cultures may not want to leave their home, or they view risk differently. Concerning gender, men are more likely to migrate than women. Men have more economic reason to migrate as their climate-dependent job is no longer plausible. While globally, women have less economic opportunities and are expected to stay at home with family, and as a result, they do not have the same chance to migrate. Before considering migration, many will consider alternatives. New technologies such as the irrigation system pictured can help reduce the effects that natural disasters have on people's property. They may also look to diversify their income by finding work that is not as climate sensitive. For example, someone who's a farmer might look for work that is categorized as wage labor. Another alternative is informal credit, in which they seek loans from family, friends, or someone wealthy they might have connections to. And as climate change becomes more prevalent, governments will need to take more responsibility. International landmark agreements, such as the Paris Climate Agreement, which is through the United Nations, will need to become more implemented and widespread. The government will need to make migration more accessible to potential migrants. Emergency plans will need to be created to prevent the loss of lives, and they will need to remain updated on their climate condition. Lastly, governments will need to provide other nations with humanitarian support in case migration is not a viable option. And these are our sources.